Welcome to our second topic of the week. In the studio, we have a guest who has come all the way from California, from a place known as East Palo Alto, but previously known as Nairobi. Can you imagine Nairobi in California? And this man here is not new to you. In 205, he sat here on the same desk, and we talked to you about drugs. He came here in March 2005, and he talked to you about drugs. He is the president of what they call the Free at Last movement. This is the Free at Last movement, a movement that targets those who are afflicted by drugs, and they urge them to free themselves, disentangle themselves from the drug problem. He is none other than David Lewis.
Thank you.
Karibu sana.
Asante
You are here in 205. You must have picked some deal Kiswahili.
Oh, Piquito.
And as he says Piquito, Kidogo.
Kidogo, yeah.
David has just come from Lamu, and part of our discussion will be about Lamu, the Lamu and its problem, the drug problem in Lamu, and the things we said before we came on camera are particularly frightening about a group of youth who had to go without drugs for a while, and the symptoms of withdrawal were frightening. We shall be touching on that as we talk about drugs and the Free at Last movement. So welcome. And before we start, Asante Sana, before we start, give us, just refresh us in terms of the sense of this problem, especially across continents. You come all the way, last time you came all the way. How does it look like globally, the problem of drugs?
You know, listening to the last guest that was on the show, and when we look at governments and movements in the world now and how we're changing faces and people are demanding different things out of this society, and we're quickly getting to this place in society where you have the haves and the have-nots. There's middle class is almost gone now, and for some reason or another that lower level of society, the people in despair and poverty seem to gravitate towards drugs. I was in Central Asia a couple months ago, where in a country called Kazakhstan, where they was up under the Soviet occupation domination for years, and 15 years ago they were allowed to let go, to be free, democracy and capitalism and all that stuff. And so you see a large portion of the population that are not being looked after properly, resorting to drugs. So they have a huge drug problem there also. In the United States, we're starting to see a rise in heroin, and what we would always say would be the affluent America, but that affluent America would be looked upon as middle class, and that middle class is slowly disappearing.
Thinning out,
yeah, and we're starting to see a huge rise once again in the heroin epidemic in what we would call the affluent communities in the United States now. You know, we always, when you look at heroin, it's a very silent thing. It's very devastating.
So before you go into the details, so you're pointing out that this could be a class problem.
Yes.
A societal class problem.
It could be a class problem, and it's the start of. It's like if you're looking for some kind of an instant gratification, drugs will give you that instant gratification, and it starts out, a lot of people in certain classes gravitate towards it. But the thing that we do have to realize is that it shows no discrimination. It's just like I was a drug addict, and I could say I was a drug addict because I was poor, I was a drug addict because I was black and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is, when I put dope in me, something very strange happens to me, right? And I think that we really need to not just put it to just this class issue. Sure, that's an issue in it. When you look at some of the people that might come from affluent America, or affluent part of our society, that get caught up in drugs also, it's like if you dig into the addiction and the mentality and the behavior, you also find out that there's something missing that these drugs start to fulfill. When I was in Lamo, a young man, and I was so glad he asked the question, he was talking to me about people that were rich folks that use drugs, and it's like, why would they use drugs? Because they got all of the material things in the world. And it's like, okay, at some level, those things don't become as important. The drug, the feeling and the euphoria, the fulfilling that the drug gives people becomes the main important thing. So all of the money, all of the houses, all of the cars in the world won't match up to that. So I always tell people, because it's a thing here in Kenya especially, oh, we're on drugs because we're poor. Yeah, I understand that. I appreciate that. But at a certain point, we have to realize that, okay, we might be in this situation forever, but that doesn't give me the right to continue to participate, to poison my body, the community, and all of that kind of stuff.
In case you've just joined us, this is Good Morning Kenya, our second topic of the week. And as I did point out, this is our first appearance this year. And in the studio, we have a very important guest, David Lewis. David Lewis was on this program in 2005. He has come back again. And he is president of what they call the Free at Last movement, free from drugs. This man has been in prison for 17 years as a result of drugs. He left, and his experience is what has made him campaign against drugs. David, those 17 years of incarceration, what light did you see to change your...
Well, one of the things, when you're forced into a confinement like that, you start to experience things that are reality-based. And the reality of being forced into that situation, the way that my life had turned out, and what was expected of me when I got out of prison, was this huge awakening for me. And I made a decision after I got out of prison to be able to change my life. You know, it works like this here. A lot of us, say for instance, if you like to read a lot, you read a good book, and you know somebody else that likes to read like you can finish a book at 2 o'clock in the morning. You'll call that person and say, hey, I just finished this book, and I'm going to bring it to you at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's what happened to me when I experienced this freedom from drugs, freedom from incarceration, is that I knew that it was people that was just like me that was desiring that freedom, and it was my obligation to be able to share with them what I had experienced out of this situation. You know, I'm going to say this, when I was in prison, I used to watch, we used to follow football, and the Super Bowl in America is coming up now. And, you know, you have this feeling of despair because you're in prison, that you will never be something. And I used to see the guys on the football team, they would make a touchdown, and then they would put them on camera, and they would say hi to their mama before they would do it. And I want to take the opportunity. Hi, Mom. Because I'm doing something good now. I never got that opportunity. The thing that I'm realizing, especially about here in Kenya, the program that I came here for was to be able to talk to people, teach people the relationship between HIV and drugs. But now, what I found here is that you have another epidemic that's centered around drugs, and that's the criminal justice system. I've visited 5 prisons since I've been here, and I've walked into those prisons and have been able to access huge audiences of people, like 500 people in one setting. And I always ask the question after I expose myself to them, to let them know who I am, and if they would like to come forward to acknowledge who they are, because we know that the first step to change is acknowledging that there's a problem, there's a situation. And the hundreds of hands that went up in those prisons told me is that, you know what, not only like in America, our prisons are 80% of people that are there behind a drug-related situation, but it's starting to look like that in Kenya. Now, one of the things in the United States, and I heard a doctor say this yesterday, in the United States, we release 600,000 people from prison a year that return back into communities, Nairobi, wherever, right? And 80% of those people are considered to be some kind of a drug-related situation that got them in prison. 60% of those people return back to prison within 6 months. And so my effort here is to be able to, first of all, create this awareness, bring the necessary people that should be involved to look at this as a situation, as a problem. The 2 problems is, the doctor said you guys have like 200,000 people that's been released from prison a year. You all don't have a parole system here. We have a parole system there. So we're talking about people that go into prison, what I call with like a sprained ankle, and 15 years later they come out with a broken leg and place them back in Madar, and we expect something positive to happen. So what we've been able to do, and I'm so grateful, because you guys are just starting to experience this, I'm so grateful, we've been able to bring Mary Chipanga from the Department Prison Officials,
Yes.
Madam Jennifer from NACADA, and we've been sitting around planning on how we're going to help with this transition, implementing different processes in several of the prisons so that people can start the process of transition and recovery while they're there. You know, you look at the medical model. If a person goes to the hospital for malaria or something, and they get the diagnosis, this is what you got. And then the discharge plan starts after that. Okay, this is what's going, this is the medicine you need to take, and you need to go to this place and live, right, and do this. So the whole process in discharging people or providing some kind of rehabilitation or transition for people in prisons, that drug or drug addicts, needs to happen on the inside,
Yes.
not 6 months or 2 weeks or whatever before
So
they
we
get out.
need infrastructural support
Yes, yes,
to intervene between the prison and ordinary life,
yes.
and even within the prisons.
You're within the prison. That's where it starts at. In
So
the prison.
when you come there, you've come. You are the guest of the United States. You're of the American Embassy.
Right.
You did the same in 205.
Yeah.
When you have this kind of striking findings, who are you talking to in government?
Well, I'm talking to, matter of fact, you know, you can talk to the foreign governments or whatever that come and provide the funding or the way with what to get here. But my effort in talking to the local people, the local community, the local government, NACADA, the prison officials, and you know, when I was down on the coast, is bringing together those leaders. Now, they might not have fancy titles like you'd have in the government, but they're people that can get things done.
Yeah.
It's just like in my community, I'm not the mayor or anybody, but I know how to move an agenda and get some things done. And so being able to gather those people together to talk about what needs to happen, because ultimately, especially when you talk about heroin addiction on the coast of Kenya, just like this young man was here a few minutes ago, you talk about a young generation, a very new generation. So I'm able to get the parents and the people that are concerned about the situation and give them some options, suggestions, some theories, some methodologies within their own culture, not from another culture. See, I just happen to be African, born in America, but still have a real resemblance of the African roots that was carried over. And I'm able to acknowledge that, to say, okay, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There's some things about this African culture that can be used for this whole transition or recovery of the people that are suffering from this chemical dependency disease.
Those of you out there who have been watching this conversation between me and David, the president of Free at Last, a movement, a global movement that fights against drugs. I'm sure you've gotten the point. This brother of ours is a brother indeed from the hood. He talks about coming from Nairobi in California. There wasn't time to talk about the history of California, Nairobi being in California, but that is a group of Africans, a community of Africans who wanted to live free like we live on the continent. One of them came over in 1963 to witness our independence and went back with the concept of creating a black island of community. It didn't work because the community went into drugs and the drugs destroyed that concept. But he's here with us. He's going to come again. I've challenged him off the camera to create a program that is sustainable, that he can be coming every year, even more often, to talk about this. Winnie Oprah has come back to the continent. She has built a great academy for girls in South Africa. This man can do the same for our victims of the drug abuse problem, and maybe we should look forward to a brighter future where we can fight this thing, not alone, but with groups such as the one David leads. Karibu sana, once again, and come again. Please that challenge, take on the challenge, and create a program of sustainability where you can come and help your brothers out here. I want to wish you the best.
Thank you. I was born for the challenge.
Thank you. Good morning. Kenya continues. When we return, we shall move on to our next item. Stay tuned.